This evening's Dharma talk is titled Prior to Thought. Is that what I said it was? Good. I had to think about it for a minute. That's kind of funny, isn't it? Sort of. Prior to thought, what about, how does that, is there some space or something where there's no thinking happening? Is that true? I don't know. But you know, Dogen, the founder of this particular lineage, Dogen Zenji in the 13th century said, he's always saying something. One of the things he said is, drop off body and mind. And of course, or maybe not of course, but to me it's like, how do you do that? How do you drop off the body? I need that. I can't drop off that mind. How can I do stuff? How can I get places? How can I fix things? How can I pay my bills? Prior to thought. So in order to understand that, we have to actually really look at the thinking process and see what the thinking process is doing, because in most people it is generating a bunch of propaganda in order to protect an imposter, and that imposter is ego. Protecting, keeping that identity of some person that can win, some person that can lose, some person that can continue in time. And of course, there is a body-mind complex that's continuing in time, but who you are is not this body-mind complex. And I can say that as a statement, and I'm not asking you to believe it. In fact, in fiction, I tell you to don't believe anything I say. And why am I saying that? Because I want you to see this. If you see this, I can leave. That's what I'm here to help you to see this yourself. I'm not here to take your authority away from you. I'm here to help you realize that you need to find your own authority, as my teacher Kobun Chino Roshi once said, not to me personally, but other people who passed around the gossip. The Dharma rumors. Guess what Kobun said? Prior to thought. So first we need to see what is thought. We sit down, hold still, as a training in here, sit down, look at the wall, and we notice that thoughts come and go, feelings, emotions, ideas, concepts, presumptions, preconceptions, analysis, all of those words, and we do. And why do we do that? Why is that? I can tell you why, at least how it looks here. We're weaving kind of a net, Trungpa Rinpoche, my first teacher, would say, kind of a cocoon around us to protect us from being afraid. We're afraid of a reality we've never even looked at, that we're imagining some kind of terrible thing that's going to happen. And there isn't a human being alive that doesn't have, doesn't have nerve endings in all the six sense fields. There's some kind of sensitivity that helps us be human, so we can feel, so we can see, smell, taste, touch, think. But that same, as I've said many times, that same thing, those nerve endings are very sensitive. If you're lay down and an ant crawls across you, you know there's something on you. Here it's just a little tiny nerve endings are there tracking that ant. Or a spider. Yeah. Or what's that other little bug called? Stink bugs. Yeah, they're kind of weighty. You notice it, you even notice when you feel that it's not an ant. It's not a spider. It's a stink bug. Does anybody had a stink bug crawl on them? Yeah.
For about an hour today, there was a stink bug crawling around on the chan at the Dogen seat.
Oh, interesting. Well, you got to get the Dharma somehow. I mean, that's a stink bug. It's probably going to his next incarnation. It'll be a caterpillar in a monastery in Tibet. Getting closer. So the idea here is to not disbelieve the thoughts, try to push them away so we don't have them, and not try to attach things to them, to methodologies. Although there are lots of them, the methods. Tantric tradition in Tibet is full of all kinds of ways of approaching this. Not incorrect. I just don't teach it because I teach in such a way that I don't have very many students. I don't want a lot of them. I want to be able to talk to people directly. Having a lot of students would be, I would have to teach in a different way probably. Or not. Lose your wallet. So dropping off body and mind is first feel this body. As meditators, we can do this. People who don't meditate would have difficulty. They will. They would continue to go in circles because they are addicted, can't think of another word that's going to work, to thought patterns of right and wrong and belief and disbelief and correct and incorrect and this opinion. What do you think about what I'm thinking about what you're thinking? I don't know. What do you think about what I'm thinking about what you're thinking about what you're thinking about I'm thinking? It sounds, that's ridiculous, but we actually do that. We actually, well, you can even hear people occasionally say, well, I don't want you to think that, we can't even control our own thoughts, and yet we're, well, I don't want you to think that I'm thinking about stuff. Probably sounds better than that, but it's like that. And it's not about stopping thinking. It's not about changing it, getting rid of it. It is about being aware of it. Awareness is king. Awareness is queen. Awareness is not separate. And awareness belongs to somebody for a while until you see there isn't anyone. And then it doesn't. Then the whole thing collapses into everything. You can't find anything. All you can find is this, and it's not a thing. It transcends this. These words are not coming out of thinking. I don't think. Occasionally, I might think, and you could say, well, that's obvious, bumping into stuff all the time. Mismatches his colors. He needs to think about fashion more. But I literally don't think up stuff. A little bit, but it's not very much. And part of the reason I don't is because it hasn't worked really well for me. Because my particular karma is extremely tense and irritating and negative. So if I think, then I have to include all of that to wild and crazy karma. But if I don't think, I'm not talking about stopping thinking. I'm talking about what Dogen said, or at least my understanding is, drop off body and mind. It's not that there's not a body here, but it doesn't belong to anyone. It's not that there isn't a mind here, but it doesn't belong to anyone. So therefore, whatever comes is fine. Whatever leaves is fine. Whatever stands on its head is fine. No comment. And I sometimes say to you, and I'm saying to you now, I don't care how you feel. On the other hand, I'm extremely moved by how you feel. I care about all of you very much in a way that I don't even know how to express it. But when I say I don't care how you feel, what I'm trying to tell you is don't buy into that. Don't get rid of the feeling, and don't also assume that it's true. And how do you do that? You have to feel it really deeply. You have to, when you start to feel, you have to stop trying to prevent that, and you have to allow that feeling to go all the way down through the carpeting, through the floor, through the basement floor, into the center of the earth. You have to be completely receptive to the feeling, so that, because if you are, then it goes right past the self-centeredness of ego. It goes all the way into everything. Sometimes called compassion, sometimes called crazy wisdom. And it's crazy wisdom because to the ego mind, the self-centered mind, the mind is looking for right and wrong, plus and minus, tit for tat. It can't understand that. It looks crazy. Why would you do something like such and such and such and such? That's crazy to do that. You need to get a hold of yourself. You need to straighten up. You need to get a job. Sorry. Don't believe your thoughts. That's a start. When they come in, the way you work with it is you notice how much you believe it. You just notice this relatively, it works. And if you were going to live forever, well, let's do that then. But you're not. Who you are is not a body mind. We're not separate from that for a short period of time. What, so many years? But who we are fundamentally is not separate from anything, anywhere. And if you realize that while you're still downloaded in a body, then we begin to work for the welfare of everyone. And the self-centeredness is not even something you have to do anything about anymore, because there isn't one. Drop off body and mind. And how do we do that? By seeing you're grasping at this form and seeing you're grasping at your thoughts, either to grasp them to accept them or grasp them to reject them. Shoto.
Is the apparent body-mind complex necessary to see the truth?
Yeah, that's why we're here. We're here. This is like a big school. We come and we're, like I remember thinking, one of the first memories I have is, it was probably 3, maybe. And I remember looking around and it kind of stuck with me. I didn't remember I had this thought until later, and then I thought back and remembered thinking years ago, I was thinking back when I was 7 to when I was 3, I was thinking, years ago I had this thought that showed up of, why did I come back here? Not why did I come here, but why did I come back here? What?
Why did you come back here?
I don't know. Still finding out. I came back here to keep you in mind. Mr. Monk. Yes.
What does the body-mind complex offer as a tool to see the truth?
Well, it shows up as relative truth. We're born and we go along for a while and we have successes and failures and we have attachments and we start to believe that we are a particular person. We believe that other particular people are not so good, and our race or our sex or something is better, or our intelligence level is higher, and we continually add on and subtract and divide and look for some kind of relative value. We look for something that is relatively valuable. And this gets us in trouble. Not everyone. Some people are born, as they say, with a silver spoon, so they're kind of pretty good. They're in what we call a heaven realm. They're in a, why is everybody, they're not people who would ever have any interest in meditating, because they don't have enough direct visceral suffering in their life. They're able to cover it up. Everybody suffers eventually, especially when they start approaching their death, or someone very close to them approaches their death, or when somebody very close to them goes another direction. We start to have a kind of death, or a kind of termination of something that we thought was, well, I'm here, I'm gonna live. I keep on living, of course, but maybe not. This might be the last talk I ever give. That's actually funny. You don't think that's funny? Yes. Nothing. What is valuable cannot be destroyed. And to think that it can is suffering. To think that you are someone who can be, that who you actually are could be affected by anything. It's not saying there's not emotions and feelings, difficulty and things going back and forth, but they don't happen to an individual. What was your name again? Kiyun, do you have a question?
Dropping off body-mind, is that death?
If you do that before the physical body dies, then it is a kind of death. It's been called ego death, but ego doesn't have to die. You just have to see that it's not real. All of the thoughts and opinions and ideas and feelings and emotions are just not substantial. So you neither have to believe them nor disbelieve them. Don't do anything with them. The death part is part of why the self-centeredness is so terrified of change, making sure things stable, making sure. This is why people have opinions, because it protects them from looking into the unknown. Someone who is opinionated is may not seem particularly fearful, but if you drop down a couple notches below the opinion, you're going to find fear that is being covered up or protected. And the only way that fear is going to come out again, it might be there for years, but if something happens out here that is completely upsets the relative truth or relative security of that body-mind-ego complex, then all that unexamined fear is going to rush to the surface, and the person is going to be, and I'm not predicting anyone's future, but the person will be terrified by it. Sean?
I was just wondering, the dropping off body and mind, is that something that happens once, or is that a process that once it begins is then always happening?
Yeah, I think we get flashes of that, but we get a flash of it, but then we kind of recognize it, and then we want to hold on to it, and so and then that is the materialistic grasping quality, wanting to hang on to awakening because it's some kind of accomplishment. But you can't, if you find out who you are, you can't hang on. There's no way to hang on to who you are. There's no way to be separate from who you are. So it's a fundamental breakdown of relative truth that collapses into the absolute. These words come out of, are absolute, they're relatively conveyed, but they don't come out of a relative understanding. So you may have, to respond more directly to what you're saying, you may have some flashes. Sometimes this is called, in the Japanese tradition, kensho, or insight into your fundamental nature. But the thing with kenshos, they're temporary. They're experiences that go away. They might last 3 days, 3 weeks. They could last longer. But usually they start to wear out, and then we're right back to the humdrum, and we're right back to and wondering what happened to that, and we saw something. But fundamental, the fancy word in Sanskrit is anuttara samyak sambodhi, or samadhi. That if that's totally seen, then it doesn't go anywhere. Even if ego comes back, it doesn't matter because ego's empty. So even if you can't be scared out of your awakening or your clarity, and it's not an accomplishment. It's something that's everyone here has this. You, not to accuse you of anything, you're covering it up, and you're covering it up because of possibly lifetimes of covering up. You probably ran into this this particular path, in the 14th century, possible. And do I believe that? No. Belief is extra. You don't need to believe anything. More, Sean? About that? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Earlier in the talk, you were talking about authority.
Yes.
How does seeing that there is no authority help you to get your own authority?
Well, that is your own authority. If you see that there's no authority, that's your authority. There is no authority. There's just this. And by seeing that there's no authority, you function out of reality. You function out of this all the time. It's showing up as the truth. And so it's like an example of most people are dealing with plus and minus, or gaining idea and losing idea. I need to go towards this because this will help me. I need to stay away from that because that's difficult or that's bad. And it's not that there isn't some truth to that. Of course there is. We don't want to We don't want to do things that are going to be destructive or painful, or so there's some of that going on. But the fundamental, excuse me, the fundamental understanding is, since there's just this, to one who has realized there's no past and future in the conventional sense. There's no ignoring of that, but there's no buying into it. As Dogen says, in all over the place, he's always talking out of both sides of his whatever he has, and he's saying firewood doesn't become ash. Ash is ash. Firewood is firewood, and one doesn't change into something else. Isn't that great? What a great way to say that. What a great way to say nothing happens, which is what His Holiness the 16th Karmapa said in 1981 on his deathbed. And I'm always quoting him because it's just an astonishing thing to say. It's such an ordinary statement, and he's actually pointing at ultimate truth. On his deathbed, he's saying nothing happens, as his students around him are all weeping because he's dying. And every time somebody comes in the room, he's asking them, how are you doing? How are you feeling? He's dying of cancer, and he's asking, how are they doing? I wasn't there, but this is a story I was told. And then he said, nothing happens.
Shoshi from Vicksburg asks, what is Dharmakaya?
There's the three kayas, or the Sambhogakaya, or the Nirmanakaya, which is the physical situation. The Sambhogakaya is the intermediate, it's called the body of bliss. And Dharmakaya is the ultimate body of truth, a fundamental truth, which is just a way of breaking it down so you see that the truth has different levels to it. As long as we're physically incarnated, we need a little bit of the stair-step idea there to get an idea what's happening. But Swabhavika Kaya is, Swabhavika, it means, is the fourth one, which means that those are all the same. It's the where you see that the Nirmanakaya, the physical situation, the body of bliss, or the intermediate state between the Dharmakaya and the Sambhoga, or the Nirmanakaya, and are not separate from each other. And if you see that, it's not entertaining, nor is it boring. It's just this. And whatever occurs is totally appropriate. Whatever does not show up is completely all right. There's no arguing with reality. One is just here, just here. As it says, there's a Tibetan tradition, there's one of the things that monastics might recite is, if it's better for me to die, let me die. Better for me to live, let me live. So just wiping out any kind of preference. This doesn't mean that you're going to, by doing that, you're somehow not going to have preferences. It's just a way of training the mind to loosen their grip just a little bit on our demand for life to be a certain way. It has a relative quality to it, and it has an ultimate quality. And if the ultimate quality begins to show up, and there's a contrast from that to the relative quality, there's still some kind of warfare going on, because fundamentally they're not different. As it says, Svabhavika Kaya, not separate.
Shane from Texas asks, have you become crazy wisdom?
No, he has. He's working on it. Shane, you are nuts. But you're also very wise. You think he's looking back at me? So, no, I haven't become anything. Shut up.
When investigating thoughts, it doesn't look like there's a discrete front or back to a thought. So what is prior to thought pointing out?
It's basically, it's pointing out, to say that, just a way of talking about it, it's saying that there is that our makeup, our consciousness, actually is flooded with thoughts all the time that tie us into this physical organism that makes it feel, this feels so real. We just feel like we're here, and we feel, through the sense fields, we feel gravity, we smell, we taste, we touch, we keep reifying our belief that there's somebody here. And I'm not saying shut that out, saying in our practice, I'm saying include everything, include all the senses. What's your question? Go ahead. What was your question? Didn't you have a question?
The first one I asked?
Yeah. Ask it again, I forgot it.
If it doesn't look like the thoughts have a discrete front or back, what is prior to thought?
Yeah. So that space, and I don't know how to say it other than space, it's before anyone has a problem with anything. Before anything, before anything, there is a space that is not a person. It doesn't lack a person. It's not a thought. It's not the lack of a thought. It's not a space, and it's not space. So this is what Dogen is referring to: drop off body and mind. Don't crank up thoughts to help you stitch together some kind of protection against the unknown, some kind of cocoon to protect you. Thought patterns, opinions, ideas, analysis, hope and fear, passion, aggression, ignorance, all of the hope that things are going to get better and the fear they're going to get worse. We buy into that and we just spin. And the sitting practice of meditation helps us kind of artificially, but deliberately experience suffering. We sit down and we deliberately feel like crap. And we do that deliberately so that we can go into the emotion and into the thought patterns that are supporting those kind of feelings, that are reifying or supporting some kind of belief in a personal self or ego that can be harmed, or that is being harmed, or is being threatened. So before thought, prior to that, and the only way that I know, not that there aren't other ways, that we can actually encourage that or do that, is to train ourselves to watch what moves. And you'll watch traffic outside. If you're sitting here, you eventually will track and watch thoughts come and go, come and go, and come and go. And eventually you begin to see the space around the thoughts. Not just a way of, it's just a metaphor. The other metaphor is before thought. Before you have a thought, before there's a problem with anything, there's just this. And if you have any identity at all, that's where it is. And that identity is not, has no time, past and future, has no space, and is not separate from anything, and does not feel like somebody. If there's such a thing as sacred, that's it. But it's not sacred as opposed to profane. It's not a relative thing. It's fundamentally, Trungpa Rinpoche called it basic goodness. Basically good. No negativity anywhere. More?
Kevin Townley from Brooklyn asks, regarding nothing happens, I've also heard you say one thing doesn't lead to another. Isn't that at odds with the notion of karmic cause and effect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the karmic cause and effect, we're not denying karma. It's happening, but that's just the waves in the ocean. This causes that, this pushes on that, that pushes on that. So cause and effect are happening all over. They're happening now. Your eardrums are vibrating as I'm making noises. So this causes that. This moves through space and runs into something, and the other thing comes off as sound. And it's so complicated. It's not just this and that. The simple way, the materialistic way of looking at it, is somebody's to blame for something or somebody's credited for something. Just a misunderstanding of relative truth. So yes, there's relative truth, but what is being emphasized is that What's being emphasized is the need, if we're going to work with suffering and we're going to try to train our minds to see more clearly, the need to hold still, hold everything that we can still, so we can watch the cause and effect happen on a very, very intimate personal level. Thoughts come, thoughts go, difficult thoughts come, and then we either react, try to cover it up, or we react and try to justify it. Well, I'm feeling this way because of her, because of him, because of that. And we take what arises, which is firewood, and we try to invent a past and a future around it. And it's not that it doesn't have one. It's just that if you go there, it's like putting bootstraps around your neck and pulling yourself right down into relative truth and plus and minus, and having to continually relive your karma over and over and over again. I'm not sure if I responded well to Kevin's question, but we're not getting rid of relative truth. We're just saying it's an illusion. It has no substance. It's circular.
Does anything change?
Both. Here again, we're back to not two. Everything changes, but the ultimate situation is nothing changes, nothing happens. Ultimate. So when your mind is working in this relative situation over as a practitioner, as a student of the Buddha's Dharma, or awakened truth, Buddha, awakened Dharma, truth. So it doesn't belong to Buddhism. It's just to wake up to the truth of not separate, is to begin to slowly separate ourselves from the constant whirlwind of samsara without actually leaving it. If you understand it, you can actually go in the whirlwind because you don't believe it, you don't disbelieve it, and then you can serve others, you can help others. This is called the Bodhisattva path. Bodhisattva vow is not to enter nirvana until all sentient beings have entered nirvana. And that means every bug. So it's a big job. Who knows? You might come back here. You might, we're including aliens. You can't come up with anything we're not including. Even if they're mean and are trying to control us.
Kevin said your answer was helpful.
Good. Good, I'm glad. Further questions?
When we do forms, how does that help us work with prior to thought?
Very good. So the forms, we do them and we repeat them. And we also notice that as we're doing the form, we have extra thoughts come and tumble around that. Or we might have a time when we're doing a form. Maybe we've been doing the doshi form. We're bowing. We're coming up, and we're aware. We look at the incense. We reach for the incense. We go through that same process. And the more we do this, we notice how we never can do that exactly the same way every time. So some kind of awareness is coming in there. Then we might find a time when our discursive thought or our subconscious gossip just starts to boil over, and the next thing you know, we've missed a whole step. We don't know where we're at, and we notice that other people are looking at us, and then we impute that other people are judging us and thinking we're a bad Buddhist, or untrained, or else you might be saying Chezan didn't train that guy very good, so you might blame Chezan, and you might even turn around and The funny thing is to watch someone go through this who's doing an awareness practice, and then they go up and they might miss a step, or the incense breaks or something when they drop it to put the incense out, and they'll say, "Whoops, that's not in the chants. That's extra." But that shows you if someone adds anything on, like a whoops or any comment. Adds anything onto that's showing you that they were not completely present in their activity. Not because the breaking the incense, that's bound to happen. You're bound to make some errors here and there. It's about awareness. Just be present. Don't add anything to it. Don't do the math. Whatever happens to you, make no response. So that's why that's there. So you can repeat that and repeat that. We could be talking to, saying something that's not even about Buddhism, but since we need to do this kind of form, we do it. We pay respect to the Buddha, and we show respect to someone who 2,500 years ago decided, rather than just go off and live in the mountain somewhere, he decided to help people. So therefore this teaching comes down through warm hand to warm hand. So I didn't learn this from a book. I learned this from living beings, several of them. And what did I learn? I learned that get your own authority. How do you get your own authority? Look closely at what authority is. Look closely at what right and wrong is, and see what it's based on.
So, is there anything to perfect?
No. Who you are, of what this is already perfect. If you have to do anything, if you want to know what you have to realize it. It's not an experience. It's experiential, just like that. As I say many, many times, but experiences go away. Realization does not go anywhere because it's never appeared. Go ahead. Your expression is priceless.
Is it still perfect if we don't realize it?
Yeah. You don't have to realize anything.
Is there a way to see that without realizing? Is there a way for us to see our confusion as perfect?
Yeah, absolutely there is. And this is a path. It's a path. I don't know if it's the path, but it's a path. And I'm very dedicated to this, and anybody who comes here has a lot of dedication to it, so we're just going to work on it together. Buddha, the example of someone who is not at war with anything, not crazy, not gluttonous, not warlike, not shut down or shut off, but someone who's completely present all the time. And a community of people that gather around that particular person. So this provides a mandala, or a circle, or a space, or a container where someone in the spinning world of samsara out there, down the street, down at the factory, down at the gas station, at the party store, anywhere you look, the corporate world, anywhere you look, provides a place where someone, if they hear these words, they can come into this space and sit down and train their mind. There's nothing to buy, there's nothing to sell, there's nothing to believe, there's nothing to disbelieve. This is the path of the Tathagatas. It's not for sale. And you have to do it yourself. It's a transcendental do-it-yourself project started 2,500 years ago, and probably way before that, with other Buddhas that we don't know about.
Shane has a follow-up question.
I bet he does.
He asks, if I had your karma, would I be doing exactly what you were doing?
No, you would have died long ago. You notice I didn't have to think about that? And you notice I'm not even concerned with harming him? I can't harm Shane. Shane's harmless.
I don't see that word harm in here.
I said harm. I said I can't harm him.
Is that right?
He's harmless.
Does that rhyme with karma?
Does it rhyme with karma? Don't try to upstage me. You can get away with that at home. You can't do it here. You do it here, and I'll move and make you come up here and teach.
When we're endeavoring to observe the Bodhisattva vows, how can we help others if we're still confused?
Well, you could start by just minding your own business, unless you're invited. Mind your own business. If you're, unless someone asks, help me with this, can you help me? I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And then you could look at it very pragmatically and say, you know, I can't help you with that. Or it might be something you could help with and say, I need help. You know what I'm saying? You follow me a little bit? You get permission. Give nobody any advice about anything, even if it's obvious that they really need to be told to stop doing this or doing that, or yeah, don't take your eyes off. Don't abandon them. Don't run away. Stay with them. Stay with them and make sure you're in touch with them. Communicate with them. Listen to them. You know, inquire how they're doing. Take an interest in how they're doing, but don't jump in based on your own thought process. Prior to thought. Keep everybody there. They're not up here and they're not down here. If they're anywhere, they're here. This does not think. There's no thinking going on here. And not even really any feeling going on here. It's called prajna, wisdom. And it's without a self. There's nobody who's wise. If there's somebody who's wise, this is fishy. It's called a wise guy. More?
Is training our minds helping other people?
Sure. If you're training your mind to see more clearly, to not go to war, to try to deal with the warfare that's in your gut, you know, that might be triggered by situations. If there's no situation happening, sometimes you can ignore this internal struggle. But then a situation comes up that vibrates with that or resonates with that, suddenly this unexamined anger starts tumbling out. And then when it does, instead of being responsible, realize it's your anger, your feelings, you know, it's your, instead we want to blame somebody. Well, I wouldn't be mad if you hadn't done this, or it's your fault. It's all tangled up, you know, trying to find who did this, who did what, who's on first, as Abbott and Costello worked on so many years ago. So more about that? It's a good question. Yes.
Thinking of the teaching of start where you are comes up.
Yeah.
And it seems like training our mind can create this idea that we're trained to become a better helper later. How can we see that that's just as helpful as?
Just like you're doing right now. Relate to a teacher. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is this path. Relate to a teacher, which you're doing. Relate to a teaching, which I endeavor to present, but I don't make you study my teachings. I make you study the teachings of, you know, lots of other teachers down through the centuries, and some contemporary ones. So you study that, and then you do it in a group. There's a way this is done to emphasize the teaching person, which is right now, and the truth that's being taught, which I endeavor to present through my understanding of it. I'm not just don't have a bunch of crib notes. I don't study anything. I don't need to study. I spent over 3 decades studying constantly and practicing. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. I don't know where it comes from. Not concerned with it. And so, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, 3 jewels. Refuge in the 3 jewels. You've already done that. I take refuge in the Buddha as the example of someone who is sane. Refuge in the Dharma is the truth that he taught. Everything is dependently risen. There's not a separate thing anywhere. Where's the tree that came from? Where's the axe that took it down? Where did the hands come that just held that up? Where do these come from? You can't find first cause. And then the Sangha, which is the one that's neglected the most in Buddhism, not all over, but quite a bit, is not enough emphasis on the community of people who get together and study together. More? Yes.
Shane has a clarification of his previous question. He says, I guess my last question was pointing to this. Is a person just a collection of causes and conditions?
To some extent, but we can't be too. We can't go that way totally, because then we're abandoning the space in which those causes and conditions occur. There needs to be some kind of spaciousness there where those things are observed or watched or witnessed, without adding on, without voting for this or not voting for that.
Was the Buddha wise?
Was he wise? I don't know, never met him. Well, his teachings are. I mean, everything is dependently arisen is an astonishing insight. It carried through to no self, no other, which even the ancient, the Upanishads and the Vedas didn't actually come up with that. They kept coming up with some kind of holy Atman or Brahman, some kind of central goodness. Whereas the Buddha didn't do that. He didn't take it upon himself. Other traditions down through the centuries have kind of elevated the Buddha, the Lotus Sutra, various other ways. It's just a different way of teaching. Yes.
Is prior to thought accessing consciousness?
Prior to thought is consciousness.
Is there a subconscious component?
Well, that's a Western idea. Jung and Freud and Adler and all of those fellows talked about that. But the way we talk about it is Alaya Vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. So there's some kind of something happening there that's similar. It's just different people look at it different ways and see how it works, and then people come up with ideas about how that might look. So just to bring it into a conceptual situation, we use the 8 consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses, the thinking process, the 6th, and then the 7th is the part of the mind that thinks there's a self and is the paranoid part of the mind. And then the 8th consciousness could be said to be the unconscious or subconscious. But it's some teachings even go deeper and say there's an alaya that's even deeper than the alaya vijnana. So if you need that kind of a concept, go ahead. But what is actually happening can be accessed with your awareness rather than concepts about it. So we need some concepts. It's like if you want to go upstairs, you're going to need some stair steps or a ladder or an escalator. You're going to need something. But the idea is to get upstairs, not just to worship steps. I love that 3rd step. More? Okay. Certainly. Any final questions? Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit at the back of our red chant books. I'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes in the hallway. We also accept donations online through PayPal. We can access debit and credit cards, and we receive checks and cash gladly. Thank you for your continued support.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Shi Shi Hu Shi Son Mu Sa Moko Sa Moko Jaoromi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. The Buddha Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.